when we opened up the practice. It's November 2019. Got a little office, and then all of a sudden, the phones just stopped ringing because everything shut down in 2020.
My grandpa used to say, God helps those who help themselves. You can pray to God, I want to do this, I want to do that. I want you to help me become this and become that. But if you don't move your feet, you're not going to go anywhere.
He grew up in a very scarce environment. And it got to the point where even the burnt rice that was on the bottom of the pan, like we had to eat that because like that's the scarcity that he grew up with.
As we were going to Roswell, I have all my stuff loaded in my dad's truck. I'm like, what am I doing? What if I go to my job on Monday and they tell me they really didn't hire me and I moved all the way down to Roswell, New Mexico from Utah? I was like freaking out. And my dad said to me, well, you can't live your life on what if.
Welcome to Turning Point, Covenant of Justice. I'm attorney Isaiah Jerez, and today I am interviewing my wife. We're going to talk about the journey that we've had together in growing our firm and becoming involved with one another and what it means to us to serve the community. Kind of want to walk through the journey that we've taken together. So when you first met me, I had a horrible credit. I was barely getting by. I think I had like a 2.5 was my GPA. My credit score was like 300. I never held down a good job. But even with all that, you still took the risk and married me.
Yep.
Why? Like, why take the risk? Because you, the exact opposite, right? Perfect credit score, almost straight A's in college, worked since you were 14.
I remember like when I first met you, well, I don't know, we dispute where we first met, but not when I first met you, but when we lived in these I lived in this apartment complex, and we met a friend's who he was turning 30. His name was Steve. We love Steve. And he was turning 30 and had this big giant birthday party to everyone to celebrate. And so I was there and he was there and we were playing some game. Do you remember the name of the game?
I don't remember some board game. Yeah.
And this one guy was like flirting with me and he was playing the game and he kept smiling at me, kind of like, who's this guy? Like, whatever. But then he was friends with Steve. I was friends with Steve. Steve was Mr. Popular. Like, we're LDS, so we went to singles awards when we were young. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Mormon culture or like LDS culture. There's singles awards, and if you are single, you go there, and it's like just a bunch of 20-something kids hanging out all the time, and you have a huge social life, right? So Steve was like everyone knew Steve because he was almost 30, and when you turn 31, you have to go to the older singles awards. So he was about on the way out.
Yeah, he wasn't married yet, so he
wasn't married yet. So if you're not married by the time you're that age, then you got to go to the older singles awards. So he just knew everyone is my point. He knew everybody. And so he was just popular. And he lived down. So I lived in one apartment complex. We lived in one apartment. It was small. And he lived downstairs. I lived upstairs.
In a small apartment, there were 4 girls living in your apartment complex. Yeah,
we had 2 bedrooms, and we each shared a bedroom. And it was called Hillside Apartments. And I lived there for almost 2 years. And Steve had been there forever, ever. And
he was 30.
He was 30. I don't know how long he lived there, but I know he'd been there for a long time. And he was like... So anyways, I went down to... This is after I'd met you. And I went down to Steve's apartment. And I was friends with this guy named Ryan, who was Steve's roommate. He was much closer to my age. I was 22, I think. 21 or 22. And he was down there playing video games with Ryan and Justin, who was only 19. He was even younger. And they were playing video games, and he's sitting there playing video games. And I walked in, because I always just would walk in, whatever. And I wanted to talk to Ryan about something. And then he was there, and he like gave me this big, huge smile. And I was like,
that was me when you walked away.
Yeah,
right?
You gave me the big, huge smile, not Ryan.
You nearly walked into a wall.
I did not. Did I really? It's just this like big smile, and it just like, when you feel like you have like a connection with someone, I don't know what you want to call it, like spiritual, like maybe you knew them before, and like before you came to this earth or something, not to like get all spiritual on everyone, but I was just like, almost like, oh, you have a moment in your life, and that was my moment of like a picture. Like I could like, not that I pictured everything, but it kind of made me stop, like a moment of stopping, right? So I was like, oh, so there was always that connection. So even though like the more I found out about it, the more I was like, red flags. Oh, geez, red flags. There was always that like connection, almost like God knew, like God was telling me, yeah, okay, red flags, but yeah, there's this like a connection. So maybe that was why. I don't know.
Okay, so being able to ignore all of the red flags and focus on that vision that you had at first.
Yeah, I don't know if it was really vision, but it was like, how would I put it? It was just like a bam, like a connection I had with you almost immediately. I mean, that was the second time I think I saw you.
So you took the risk. We got married, and I still had bad credit.
No, well, you did, but remember,
Yes.
I made you pay off everything before we got married because I wasn't going to get married with debt like that. So I made him pay everything off, and he paid it all off.
We ended up getting married, and I applied for law school. And again, with bad grades, it was kind of hard to find the right law school to get into. And I applied at several different law schools, and I got into a law school down in California, and I really wanted to go there. I had a friend from college that was down there, and we were packed up. We were ready to go. We're at a baseball game with your work, and I got a call from UNLV saying, "Hey, there's a spot open in our part-time program. Yes, we want to take it." And immediately you jumped on it and said, "Yes, we're going to Vegas."
Yeah, I really didn't want to go to California. Really, it's just further away from my family, and he could start part-time. California couldn't, and the school that he was accepted to in California was like triple the cost, so it was a no-brainer.
So closer to family, cheaper, and then I was able to work as well.
Right.
That first year in law school.
Right.
So we come down. You're 4 months pregnant.
6.
Or 6 months pregnant with our oldest, and I come down looking for a job, and I end up landing a job making $12 an hour working as a runner for a law firm.
Yeah.
And I'm going to school full time, and then when our daughter comes, you make the brave decision to stay home, even though I'm making $12 an hour.
Yeah, I did try to find a job, and like, you know, it just wasn't meant to be. The economy hadn't hit that bad at that point, but
2006.
yeah, so it has,
2006.
no, it's 2007.
The end of 2006, early part of 2007. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't really, I mean, I did look for a job a little bit, and I worked for that temp agency before Bella was born, but couldn't like find anything. It was kind of weird. So I gave up.
And then, but decided to stay home with
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah. So I know our daughter asked me the other day, do you regret giving all that up? So what I did prior to is I have my degrees in mass communications. So I have an emphasis in public relations. My actual main job at that time was an environmental planning group, which I did public involvement for that. So we had different contracts with people. We had one with the power line company, so I would go to public meetings and let people know that power lines are going to be put close to their houses. It wasn't always like that. And I enjoyed the job, but I especially enjoyed working for newspapers and writing. So my daughter's like, why did you give all that up? Like, do you regret giving all that up? You could have done both. And I'm like, maybe not, though, because like I wanted to have a focus with my children. And I could not have that focus if my mind was always elsewhere, trying to work on a deadline, because you work in a newspaper, you're working on deadlines, you're going out and interviewing people, you're doing things like that. I mean, this is from 2004 to 2006. It just didn't make sense. So I don't regret it. And I didn't become like the amazing, well-known writer or person maybe I wanted to, but you know, that's okay, because it is what it is, and I don't really regret making that decision. So
Because you ended up being able to stay home with 4 kids and then plus
right.
one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 5 total.
For 5 total kids. And
Yeah.
let's explore that a little bit, because you say like you kind of gave up that kind of dream to be home with the kids? And
Well, I always wanted to be a mother too. And in this day and age with women, it's like they want you to have it all. And then women are stressed out and the poor, like, I mean, I look at it differently than I did back in my 20s when I had my oldest child, is that as I stayed home and I started to just love my freedom to do whatever I wanted to. I'm not like crutched down to any like job where I have to like make sure that I have to do this and this. I can just be like, hey, let's just go to the park, for like 4 hours and you guys can run around. Like that is what I started to just enjoy doing that. And so every now and again, I'd find like a little side thing here and there and write a little bit because that's what I enjoyed doing. But I wouldn't have had that. I would have not had any of those memories. Like almost like someone would be helping me raise my children, not me raising my children. So you got to do what's best for you.
And that worked.
And that was best for me. And I didn't realize it till I had been like further on, maybe when I had 2 kids at that point, I was like, yeah, I don't really want to go back to work because then I couldn't just do what I wanted with my children and not have them sit like at a babysitter's all the time or like things like that. And I'm like, well, no, just go back to work when I'm older and get back into the industry if that's what I want to do or if I want to do something else. But then I haven't done that either because we had a baby 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I still
COVID
haven't,
baby.
yes, so I still haven't gone back and done much with that degree.
So having the time with the children was much more valuable than any kind
Absolutely.
of experience that you would have been able to meet outside of the home.
Yeah, you never get that back. You never get that back.
So luckily at some point I started making more than $12 an hour.
Yeah.
and then we weren't living off of student loans so much, but actually starting to make a good living. Mm-hmm. But as attorneys, we deal in such a competitive and contentional environment. The people I work with, they don't like me. Insurance companies, they don't like me. Opposing counsel, they don't like me. Yeah. And sometimes the clients don't like me, right? And so I've got to carry all that stuff and then come home. And how is that, being a wife and a mother, and all of a sudden your angry attorney husband comes home after having dealt with so much stress at the office?
Well, after you graduated law school, you binge watched, what was that show?
Boston Legal.
No. Before that. The one where they're like stranded on an island.
Oh, Survivor.
No, not Survivor. You never watched Survivor. That's the reality show.
Oh,
it's it had the Desmond.
The one with Desmond in it, right?
Yeah. The Desmond name. Anyways, he binge watches this show like all 7 seasons for the first 9 months after law school. Because when you're in law school, you read a lot. And he did not want to read or do anything schoolwork whatsoever, which is fine. And he was clerking for the judge. He had the clerkship for the judge. So he did some work for his stepdad. And his stepdad gave him his road bike as for doing the work. So he started riding bikes, which he always liked to do, but he hadn't done it for years and years because, you're in law school, you're in school, you're not have as much time. And so he started doing that, which drove me crazy because I was like, you take too much time on your bike, you're like young and married and you're like frustrating. I got like 3 babies here and you are like going off on your bike. So for a little bit, I was like annoyed, but then I realized that's how he got rid of his stress. So I'm like, if he was acting like that, I'm like, just go jump on your bike and leave me alone. Go ride your bike,
To go ride my bike.
Because that's his stress relief. So
yeah, I remember.
People need to work out.
Yeah, it was a little bit
less fights. If he's out there riding his bike, he like gets his anger out on the bike. I don't know. De-stressor, right? They say exercise is a de-stressor, so it is for you.
Yeah, and there was that shift where you were basically saying exactly, right? Like the bike was a place for me to find my zen. It was a place to go out and to get calm and relaxed. So when I would come home and I'd be upset, you would say exactly that, right? Just go ride your bike.
Yeah, just leave me alone and go ride your bike. Catch you later. Yeah.
So I'd always wanted to open up my own practice, my own law firm.
Right.
And so in 2019, I started getting serious about it and talking about it. And we had planned, or we had talked about in April 2020 that I would open up my own practice. And in November, early part of November 2019, I come home and I tell you I just quit my job.
It was good. Sometimes you just need to be your own boss because you just want to do it on your own, your way. So there we go. We jumped in. And now it's been 4 years as of last month.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about those 4 years, because when we open up the practice, it's November 2019. The first meeting that I had was with an accountant. Even before setting up the business, I met with an accountant, try to talk about how to structure the business that would be best for us, follow the accountant's advice, and then got a little office over on Pecos and Harmon, and then all of a sudden the phones just stopped ringing because everything shut down in March of 2020. Yeah, it was completely dead, right? Everything shut down.
But you still had some cases, so actually, honestly, I wasn't worried.
The plan was for you to come in and to help work in the firm. And at the end of 2020, while I'm conducting a deposition, I get a text message, and you had sent me a picture of a pregnancy test.
Yeah. I was going to work for the firm at least maybe 30 hours a week or more, but then COVID hit, so I had all the kids home, and then they had to do all their schoolwork and make sure they're set up on stuff, and then in Nevada, they just really wouldn't let the kids go to school. Luckily, we were in a charter school, so our charter school let the younger kids go half time starting in October, but the older kids still had to be at home. So, yeah, I had that little break, but then I ended up having another baby. So, yeah, life happened, right? Like, what do you do,
Yeah.
It is what it is. I was 40 years old.
Yeah, and pregnant with your fifth.
Yeah. I didn't plan on having a baby at 40.
Shortly after that, I broke my leg skiing.
Yeah.
So you're
pregnant.
pregnant.
And I was pregnant, and it was a really bad ski year.
Not a lot of snow.
No, that year, man, there was no snow, and that was 2021, right? Yeah. So, things had opened back up. The kids had finally been allowed to go back half time, all of my kids, in March, I think it was, in the charter school, because they weren't in the regular school district. And then he broke his leg. So I'm like, oh. So I was out skiing with our two oldest children. We're up at Snowbird. And like you said, there wasn't a good snow year, so there wasn't much snow on the ground. But there had just been a recent storm. Yeah.
And so there were little patches of powder, and I went to go ski through this little patch of powder, and there was a tree stump that was buried and smashed my knee into it, breaking the plateau of my tibia. So I remember sitting up there on the top of the mountain, and the kids...
And he also, when he did that, he dislocated his knee. And so his leg was, weird. And then he moved, and his knee popped back in. So you imagine, how much pain. And at this point, I wasn't skiing anymore because the year was in 2019, I fell down the mountain skiing and tore my ACL and my MCL, and I refused to go back skiing because it took me 9 months to recover from that. And I had a surgery, I had 8 months of therapy. I won't ski again, unfortunately. But so I wasn't there. He was just with the kids.
Ski patrol ends up taking me down, but I remember following that, right? I wasn't able to ride my bike. I couldn't go skiing. And I
was in a lot of pain, as you can imagine. They didn't cast it.
Yeah, they didn't cast it. I just had to
because of the top. So he basically broke bones off the top.
And I remember going to the doctors, and the doctor, I didn't want to take pain medication. And the doctor was trying to convince me to take pain medication. And my biggest concern with taking pain medication was getting addicted to the pain meds.
Right.
And so at that point, it seemed like probably one of the most, a very low point in my life, because here I am, I've got the responsibility of bringing in the money for the family. I've got a broken leg, I can't move, and I've got to take medication. And so now I can't think and make decisions. And you're pregnant.
Right.
And that's when we decided to hire someone, right? We made our first hire in the law firm, and now it's grown since then. I think now we have 10 people working with us. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it might be 9, but yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that we've definitely kind of grown to going from just the two of us and now to have a 9, 10 people working together with us. And that has always been it hasn't been a smooth road at all, right? We've made some bad business decisions along the way. And
but I think that's just normal. Like when you operate your own business, I think it's just normal. You're going to make those bad decisions and waste a bunch of money. You're like, oh my gosh, that was a lot of money to waste.
yeah.
But
always something that we could recover from.
Yeah, nothing outrageously crazy, but yeah, I've learned a lot about the legal field. Quite honestly, I didn't do much in the legal field before this, but I have a lot of background in public relations and public involvement. Even with the newspaper, like I can do interviews because I interviewed so many different people back then, and I can edit anything, write whatever. So those skills come in handy when you're like trying to help him because he's too busy to do a bunch of this stuff. So
now working with the law firm, and you work crazy hours for the law firm because, again, your main focus is as a mother and
right.
being
I
there
only
for the
work
children.
pretty much part-time. I try to work the least amount as possible so I can take my kids places, especially during the summer.
So a couple years into our practice, things are going successful. We're doing well. And at the end of, or towards the middle part of 2022, I get the good idea, like, hey, maybe we should start advertising and try to scale this up. And I was really nervous about it. I was really nervous about the risk associated with it because we had a good life. We were getting a lot of referrals. We were able to manage it all. And, I didn't have to work that much. And you were actually a big driving force for me in pushing it to the next level and saying, okay, we're going to grow. And I was a little bit surprised because you were more willing to take that risk than I was.
Yeah, I think in my younger years, I probably would have freaked out and cared. But now, I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
But I'll go under. We'll just go move in a tiny apartment and just hang out, and then you'll have to go work for somebody. I just don't really I realized that you just got to take the risks and whatever, just do your risks because life is short and there's people all over that would probably like to do something different than they're doing in their career or in their life, and they have this fear. And I think the fear that people have really stops them from doing things. At least it stopped me from doing particular things in my life. And so, maybe it's just 2020 hitting, or maybe it's just things that I've gone through within the last 5 years of my life. But I'm just, why let someone control you with fear and just, jump in and go for it and really see how it goes. Might work out, might not, I don't know. But it's been fine. I'm amazed how many people you've hired because quite honestly, I was not planning on hiring that many people that quickly.
Well, we've seen good growth, but I know that several times when we've talked about making decisions in our life, and we always try to boil down to, well, how do we feel about it? And whenever it's boiled down to whether or not I'm going to make a decision in life, if I'm hit a roadblock and I say I'm not going to make that decision because I'm scared, you've always been there to say, okay, then you need to do it. If I'm not doing something and it's only because I'm fearful, you've been there to push me to say, okay, then you've got to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just been all whole marriage, maybe more the last 5 or 6 years. I think when I was younger, I feared a lot more things. But I'll tell you a story. When I was got my first real job out of college, I did all these internships in college. I did with PR agencies and every time I was trying to get a job, they would say to me, you don't have experience in media, meaning with a news station or a newspaper. I didn't have any of that experience. I did nonprofit internships in PR with nonprofit agencies. I did one with a PR agency, and I had all this experience, and I was not finding a job. And I had been working for this as a secretary. I've been a secretary. It's not my favorite job at all. But Anyways, so I wanted to stop working as a secretary. I just was like done with school and I was applying, and he left to go live in Chile. And so he was gone, which is what he chose to do. That's fine.
When we graduated from
After
school.
we graduated college, yes. So I was applying for all these jobs, and I'd always get this, okay. So then I get this interview on the phone for this. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of Roswell, New Mexico, but the Roswell incident in like 1947 is what it's known for. I don't know if you've heard it. And their newspaper interviewed me on the phone, and I got the job. And it was only on the phone. I'd never been there. I didn't know anybody there. So I like to my parents, okay, well, I actually had gotten another job in a nonprofit working at a homeless shelter and it was doing somewhat PR, but also it was working with children, and it would pay a stipend. And I don't know if you guys know what a stipend, well, people know what a stipend is, but it's basically they got funding for a grant. You get paid the grant. It's not a lot of money. And I had taken that job, but I hadn't started. And then I got this other job. And when you start out in the newspaper world, your pay is really low. I was making $9 an hour with a college degree. That was it. But I'm like, hey, you have to start somewhere. So I went down, and as we were going to Roswell, I have all my stuff loaded in my dad's truck, and we're headed down there with my parents, and I'm driving my car, and he's driving the truck, and we get there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What am I doing? What if I go to my job on Monday and they tell me they really didn't hire me, and I moved all the way down to Roswell, New Mexico from Utah, and it's like a 14-hour drive, and I got this apartment, and I know nobody. The only person that lived there that any of my family members know is my brother-in-law's sister and brother both lived in this small town, and in the middle of nowhere, like it's 3 hours from Albuquerque, I think. It's been a while since I've been there. And it's just in the middle of nowhere. And I was like freaking out. And my dad said to me, well, you can't live your life on what if. And I was like, I've never thought about it like that. And I was like, you can't live your life on what if. So at that point in my life, you have moments in your life, like glimpses of that kind of give you a glimpse or is a stopping point. Almost like your life slows down for a second. Like when I met him and he smiled at me that one time, it's like life slowed down. Or that when my dad said that, well, you can't live your life on what if. So I was like, okay. So I sucked it up and I went to my job on that Monday, and they did hire me. It was right. I wasn't like freaking out. So it's just like taking those like plunges, those not being scared to do stuff. So maybe that was the point where I'm not saying I've not had fear and do things since then. Obviously, I have, but I think it's changed more since like the last 6 years. I guess I just have even less. I'm like, whatever. What does it matter? Yeah. Just go do it. Is that what you want to do in life? Go do it, because life is short, and you could die at any moment. So
yeah, and taking those risks and putting what you've saved or what you've built over the years into what your dream is, you've got to take those risks if you want to succeed, right?
Yeah, you can't care. Yeah. You just have to do. My grandpa used to say, God helps those who help themselves. So you can pray to God, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want you to help me become this and become that. But if you don't move your feet, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's a hard lesson to learn.
I remember now the show that I binged watched. It was Lost.
That was
show,
it.
Right?
Lost, yeah.
And
that was
in 2020, when most of the world is starting to binge watch shows all over Netflix, you actually went the opposite direction.
Yes, I quit binge watching it. I quit watching all shows. I felt like they were a complete waste of time. They put things in it that are very inappropriate for everybody, not just children. Like, I don't need that in my head. And I just wanted to focus on different things, and that was in the way of me. Like, I wanted to focus more on my children. I wanted to focus more on like understanding spirituality, like God, and like where like life is going to lead you. Like, I'm very fascinated with prophecies and that come from the Bible or things like that. And I wanted to do that type of stuff, and I wanted to focus on that. And that binge watching shows that like are super interesting, it distracts your time. It takes up so much of your time. It's like how I view video games. It's the same thing. You waste your time just staring at a screen when there's so many other things you could do to help, to increase your knowledge, to help yourself. And this is something like I just wanted to do this instead. Like I used to binge watch all shows. I think the very last show I binge watched was that tiger show that was so popular during 2020, the tiger guy in Oklahoma.
Was he Oklahoma or Florida?
No, it was Oklahoma.
Was
the lady was in Florida and he was Oklahoma. But they were like having, I don't know, you've seen the show, whatever. But I was like, why am I watching this? This is such trash. Like, why? I wouldn't want my children to see this at all. Like, why in the world am I watching this? This distracts from everything I want for my life. So that was probably the last show I binge watched. So I don't really watch shows. Here and there, I'll watch a family show or if I'm super curious about a documentary. But what I do, I've always been into documentaries. So I like to watch things that have to do with different prophecies from the Bible, things are educational, I guess. And I don't really binge watch them. I just kind of do my own research to hear what they have to say. Like my background in newspaper writing, I used to do a lot of research. I find that stuff interesting. And I also, before 2022, I was very political, and that's one thing we always would fight about. It's politics. We're not exactly the same politically. I think over the years we've kind of gotten closer together politically, but I just like, it doesn't matter because they're all corrupt. So what do you do about it? You know, they're just all corrupt. Both sides are corrupt. There's even the people in the middle that say they're not corrupt. They're still corrupt. So it's like.
So let's talk a little bit about this spirituality, right? Because you wanted to focus more on this spiritual journey. And that's always kind of been a big draw to me since I met you, is your focus on discipline and in the spirituality. Mm-hmm. For me, I look at the parable of the talents. And that's always been a big driver for me, especially now when trying to grow the business, because I feel like the Lord has blessed us with the ability to create something. Mm-hmm. And I feel like at the last day, if I'm held to be accountable for the talents that I have, and I go back to the Lord and I say, you know, I squandered my time on vacations and just hanging out with the kids, that He's going to hold me accountable for that. And I feel like He's given us the resources and the knowledge so that we can grow our firm and build our firm. And so having you as a spiritual strength there at home, reminding me to say my prayers and to read the scriptures, has always been valuable to me. But that passion that you now have for spirituality, where do you think that's going to lead to in the future?
Spirituality, like I grew up in an LDS family. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I have a lot of pioneer ancestry, goes way far back, all the way to like ancestors who knew the founder of the church, and they helped establish different parts of the church. And so I have all that background, and I have like growing up, always going to church, and it's like a process, right? Spirituality is a process. You have to try to learn for yourself about God, and you have your own journey is what I'm realizing. And like I have been on my journey, and you, I guess, have been on your journey. And there's points in my life where I'm not doing very good at being on my journey because I'm not paying attention to God, and I'm not paying attention to what God's trying to tell me. But I guess you still see me as doing that. But I see myself as not always doing that. So my focus now is to try to always do that so that I can be guided in this world, because let's just face it, this world is messed up, and there's a lot of things that happen, and you want to try and keep your children safe, and you want to keep yourself safe. So if you're in tune to that, like God's going to warn you of things. So maybe that's what pushes me to stay focused on that, at least in the last 3 years, for sure. So, but you, spirituality, have always been an example to me because like you didn't come up from my background. You came up from a different background. You weren't always part of the church that I'm part of, and I didn't know you back then at all. Like I've only known you since you've been this person as a member of this church that you joined when you were, 21? So I think our spirituality just in our marriage kind of bounces back off each other, like trying both to figure out our own spiritual journey. And I think it's an individual thing too. Like I can only understand what God wants me to do, and you can only understand what God wants you to do, and then together we work together, right? So I don't know, just very like I just have to. It's just a spiritual, my own spiritual journey, trying to figure out life, and everyone has it. Like it's just people have to figure it out on their own, whether they go the atheist side or whether they go, I don't know, they Buddhist, you know, things like that. Whatever they feel they're being drawn to. So
Yeah, and so in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it has a lay ministry. And so as a lay ministry, the people that serve in the church don't get paid.
right.
And we made the decision heavy this year in 2023 to spend a lot of money on the business and to focus on growing the business. And then in the summer, I received a new assignment in the church to then become a branch president, basically like the pastor of a certain unit, which then required all this additional time. And you've just been so wonderful in supporting that. And how do you do that? How do you go from saying, okay, my husband's now working a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We got our 5 kids, and now he's being called to then be out of the home even more.
Well, because I believe like everyone's led by God, and that we have our own spiritual journey in this life, whatever that may be, wherever it leads you. It's just like, it is what it is, right? I guess that's the mentality I have. So yeah, you're extra busy, but think of the opportunities that you get to serve, like in this capacity, with all these people that need your help. And you obviously know they need your help, and I obviously know they need your help. And so we serve in that capacity in our church, and it's actually a beautiful thing. I can't deny it. Like, we've served in the branch before, but not as the pastor, just as a helper, I guess is what you would explain it as. And then also in our ward in the past, you've had lots of busy callings, you know, and I have too, and it's just an honor to help people, and it's just a way for us to do that. So it's just a way to serve God. So why would I deny that to you?
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing, right? In the unit that we were previously, it was well off, well established, really no welfare needs. And now we're in a unit where there are people that struggle to pay their rent or struggle to put food on their table.
Yeah.
And so now we're just in a completely different capacity of trying to help people just get by with bare necessities, and then as well help to try to help them to grow spiritually as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the unit that we're serving in, they speak Spanish, right?
Yes, and I do not.
Pero está aprendiendo, está tomando clases.
Sí, señor.
Yes.
Mi clase. I'm taking Spanish classes this time around because I want to be able to communicate with people. There's a lot more that do not speak English this time around where we were in there before. Basically because of everyone that's come over the border. So there's just a lot more of that. So I would like to communicate with people in their own language. So I'm trying to learn it, but language has always been a difficult thing for me to learn.
Yeah.
So.
And we're doing the best effort that we can, trying to speak at home, but
None of our kids know Spanish. They claim they understand it, but it is harder to speak than it is to understand. So it could be true.
And our 14-year-old Isaiah, he did an amazing job when he got up in the congregation, 14 years old, got up in the congregation, wrote his talk, stood in front of everybody, and read it in Spanish. And he did an amazing job. Well understood, to the point, spiritual focus completely on Christ, and on the sacrifice of Christ. And it was amazing to see him do that. But yeah, he does, during the congregation, he doesn't put on the translation device. He just,
No, he sits there. I'm like, you don't understand. So then his younger brothers won't do it either. And I'm like, you guys aren't understanding a word. They claim they are. Like our charter school, they do Spanish from K, but only once a week. K all the way up to 5th, but they only do it once a week. And do they do it in 5th grade, actually? Yeah, it's still once a week in 5th grade. And then in 6th through high school, they just take 2 Spanish classes, and they can choose what year they want to take it. So our older kids have already done this. And so they do have that background in Spanish, but the younger kids have only done like the elementary or part of elementary, since we still have a 3rd grader. But yeah, so I don't know how much they understand. I do feel like he speaks better Spanish than I, but he doesn't. He tells me he communicates with some of the kids his age that don't speak English yet, but I haven't seen it because I'm not always there when he's with them. So
with the other young men in the group, and but he's there. He's hanging out with them, participating in the activities, and trying to talk to them. And he's definitely making a strong effort to.
Yeah, I think by the end of it, they'll probably all know Spanish, including myself, because I feel like that's what my journey is heading me to. Like God is pushing me to learn the language and to help these people that have, well, some of them are recently over the border, some of them they're longer. And there's a lot of political jargon about whatever you believe, they're here. So what are you going to do about it? Let them sleep outside and starve. Like, what are you going to do about it? They're here. They're people. So
a big part of what we do is help them understand what type of opportunities are here for them and the steps that they need to take to then really benefit from those opportunities that are there for them so that they succeed.
Right. It's just helping people to succeed. Like, not everyone has the best parents or childhoods is pushing them towards to be better than themselves. Like, I was lucky, and my parents, they pushed me to do better than myself. Their parents did the same thing, and I always had that. Like, it's grateful. It's the opportunity that I've been giving in my life, but not everyone has that, and they don't have the assets or the things to go towards their life. And so I think that I help those. It's kind of like pay it forward, right? So that way we can help them, and because God's blessed us, we can bless others. Or even if God wasn't blessing us, you still can help.
And we try to do that in our own home with our own kids and providing them the opportunities or the exposure as well to different activities, to different opportunities that they have, whether it be in school, outside of school. And how has that been as a mother, being able to provide that for your children, to provide those opportunities or that type of perspective for them?
Like, kids nowadays, I guess it was like with us too, but there was not so much electronic devices. And you had the Nintendo, right? Different Nintendos. But there wasn't like the handheld and everything. And so it seems like kids just want what they can get. And it's like, you don't really need that. Like, you could it's hard to get them to see that they can go out and help someone else. So it's good for us to be in this atmosphere that we're in now, with this service that we're doing with our church, so our kids can see that, like, the opportunities that maybe they have, but there's a lot of kids out there that don't have the same opportunities, and so they're able to help them.
Yeah, my dad is from Colombia, and he always used to get mad at us when we would throw any little piece of food away, because he grew up in a very scarce environment. And it got to the point where even the burnt rice that was on the bottom of the pan, like, we had to eat that because, like, that's the scarcity that he grew up with, and we really had to appreciate that. And he told us, he said, you always tried to preach to us, you don't understand what you have here in the United States. And I didn't understand that until I went and lived in Chile. And I visited in people's homes where it was a shack. They had a dirt floor. They had no running water in the house. And it really started to appreciate, okay, if the Lord has given me this, he wants me to do something with it, right? And so with the kids, I think you're 100% right that the opportunity we have right now to serve in a less influential unit, that's providing the kids with a perspective that, okay, there are other people that don't have as much.
Yeah, it's in reality. It's a reality check. You know, like when I was a kid and I lived in a very bubble because I grew up in an area that's mostly LDS, and still is kind of to this day. It's a little less now, but I had friends that would say, "Oh, you're just living in a bubble." And then when I went to college, I went to a community college first, and there's these people from out of state that would like knock us that had grown up in this area that was a bubble, saying, "Oh, you live in this little bubble, blah blah blah. You don't understand the real world, blah 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 blah." And maybe to the point that you don't understand the real world, yes, but you know it's there. But it's just really seeing it really is eye-opening. I remember when we served in the branch the first time, I was teaching kids, like, it's kind of like a Sunday school class, teach them about different topics about God. And they were like age 8, 9, 10. And I asked this one little boy to read, and he's like 9 or 10 years old, and he couldn't read. And that was eye-opening for me because I was like, but then I thought, well, how is he going to learn to read? His parents probably read in Spanish, or maybe they don't even read in Spanish. And they don't read in English. His mom doesn't speak any English. And so, yeah, how is he going to read? So he had a little bit of a learning disability, which knocks on top of that. And then, so it's just those eye-opening moments that can be influential in your life.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing so amazing about the service is that when we're out there serving other people, whether or not it's in our church or in our own community, yes, we're providing something to other people, but they as well are teaching us.
Right.
And they always have something to teach. And so it's I feel it's that symbiotic relationship that God creates for us if we're willing to give, that we're going to receive. And it comes from at times, the most unexpected source.
Right. God gives you those angels, right? He gives you those angels, whether they're real angels or they're just people that help you along your way. And you never expect it because you don't know who they're going to be.